like so you can throw shit back at them.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, again, if we were getting into a conversation about patent trolls and all that, and I would get on my soapbox about
We could have that conversation. That's what this
the way I really feel about patents and the whole process. Like I said, I live in reality. And as an entrepreneur, you can sit there and pontificate about the way the world should be, or you can actually attack the world the way it is today and you can win. And I want to win. And so the reality is, the reason we're doing it today is because that's the environment we have to play in, and we have to do it. If we don't do it, we're screwed.
So that's a different way of saying it's defensive.
It's absolutely defensive.
Okay. Interesting. So you have 22 claims in your geolocation patent. We saw at least a bunch of other geolocation patents up on the RPX spreadsheet at the end. How many geolocation patents do you think we have? Because like when I'm in one place, I'm in one place. How many different ways can you tell me I'm in one place?
Well, it's just like the mobile phone patents. How many mobile phone patents do we have? Right? It's the same thing's coming for geo. I mean, location's the hotspot now, so you're seeing everyone start to file, and it's in our interest, as you guys were just talking about. How broad is it? Our 22 claims, they're really broad. If you read it right now, you'll be like, wow, that covers just about every type of notification of geo there possibly is, and that's the point.
So how you didn't prosecute your own patents personally, obviously, you know, particular. If you're in the patent office, and I've never been in the patent office, and there's some examiner and he's looking at your 22 claims, he says, wow, this is brilliant. I guess there's no other geolocation patents out there, right? I mean, you know, and this is why I think Joel and Micah were talking about if we could have a wiki out there, if we could have a website where you could post these patents, and then people like yourselves could come in and say, oh, this is ridiculous. I know of like 16 other technologies to do similar things, and could, you know, knock it down from 22 claims to 12 to 8 to 16 to something less. And not to pick on your patent, because I'm not picking on your patent. You know, I appreciate why you did.
Pick away.
Well, it really seems like it seems remarkable that the patent examiner could have his head so deep in the sand, or somewhere else, right, that he didn't know there were other geolocation patents out there that somehow didn't touch this in some way, that you got 22 claims in there?
Yeah. In all fairness, and I'm not usually one to defend any government employee, but they did actually contact us and reviewing the claims. They were fairly knowledgeable about other geo claims that are out there and questioned us quite extensively about several of the claims, and we had to respond. I don't remember the exact number we had to respond to, but we did have to respond, and we ended up modifying one of the claims. I believe it was just one, but we modified one of the claims to get through.
So you have a nice weapon.
Yeah.
You're going to play offense?
I have no plans on playing offense whatsoever.
You have anybody offer you to buy that patent for you so they can play offense?
The number of people that have actually offered a large sum of money for this is unbelievable. I couldn't believe it, and I couldn't believe how fast it happened. And then I couldn't believe how fast companies that we're all very familiar with here in the social space, they came after it right away as well. It was surprising to me. Of course, we're not going to, I mean, I have no interest in selling it or even having that discussion. But I am fascinated by the amount of people that were privy to, like we didn't make an announcement. I didn't go to TechCrunch and say, hey, TechCrunch, check it out. 22 new claims in the geospace. In fact, we didn't talk about it at all internally, and I think it was maybe even a few weeks after this last one got issued that I even announced it to the employees. So, but I think people out there were offering us money for our patent, quite honestly, before probably most of the employees in our company knew we had been issued it.
Were they offering you money so that they could have it as a defensive mechanism, or were they offering you money because they wanted to go play offense and start suing everybody, or was it a mix?
It was a mix. The people that we've all heard about in the room were wanting it because of the defensive mechanism, because of how broad it is and what it claims, and what we're doing with it. But the reality of it was the majority of the people that have contacted us obviously are going to do offensive with it, right? They're just trolls. They're companies that are buying patents and just going after people. It's pretty clear if you read our patent, I mean, what it covers from push notifications and location to interest, social networks to whatever, that they're, you know, it's a very useful patent.
Why don't you sell it?
I mean, I didn't get into this. When I came back to build Banjo, we don't need to go into my history, but I did come back to just build a company and sell it. I came back to build something meaningful and big. And the reality is, I'm not going to start doing patents and selling them to make extra coin. There's a lot of other business models I'd get into to make money that's actually faster, easier, and probably more tasteful and with more moral scruples. So I'm just not going to do it. So I have no interest in selling. Does that mean that we won't sell the company one day or not sell it? No, of course not. But right now, it's just no interest to me.
Did they offer a rev share or cash?
Cash.
Interesting. So Ed, I want to jump to Ed for a minute because I haven't brought Ed into the conversation. You've got Hattery Labs and engine advocacy. You're passionate on this topic. Damien could be an awesome troll, and he's chosen not to, right? So, that's great. But talk about it from your perspective and the companies that you see and the companies that are supporting engine advocacy or members of engine. Talk about what you guys do and sort of how you deal with the community and where you're going to go with this.
Yeah, so like a lot of people at Hattery, I wear a couple of hats. I both help Engine Advocacy, which is a nonprofit organization with about 500 plus entrepreneurs and startups advocate for issues that matter to them in the technology and business space. And I also work as an analyst with Hattery, which is a seed stage venture fund and an innovation lab. So we help companies in our portfolio as well as residents in our space develop their business and grow. I'm primarily here to talk about patents from the engine perspective, which is the problem we see, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs see in the patent troll problem. I come to, my background is in economics, and what I see in the system right now is a lot of incentives that are not tilted in the right way for real innovators to be developing real products, building real businesses. The litigation that passed a couple of years ago has been brought up a couple of times now, the American Invents Act. And even President Obama a couple of weeks ago in a YouTube fireside chat brought up the fact that this legislation only went about halfway as to where it needed to go to stop the kind of extortion, and those are the words that he used, that you see with the patent troll problem. What we're trying to do, and we did this a couple of months ago, we brought about 32 companies to Capitol Hill, is to bring entrepreneur stories to Washington, to tell them, we had one company say that they spend $10,000 per employee to defend against patent troll suits. I've talked to other entrepreneurs who are saying they're going to devote 10 to 15% of the next round of funding they raise to defend against patent trolls. The problem is scaling and really hurting companies that are building cool technology that's really delighting consumers. And what we need to do is get people's voices together, along with people like the App Developers Alliance, to tell people in Washington, this is a real problem. This is impacting businesses, and entrepreneurs are not certain about what they should do. I heard a story the other day about a relatively prominent startup sending a blast email out to all of its employees asking, anybody have any good ideas for patents? And I mean, these are things that we're hearing more and more because people don't know what to do, they're afraid. And they see more and more patent troll stories and stories about lawsuits that are predatory. And I think what we need to do is build a more effective voice as a community, both in San Francisco and around the country, to really tell Washington, this is a problem and we need to do more to address it. Because there's not a lot of will in Congress to go back to an issue they thought they dealt with 2 years ago.
So we interviewed somebody recently, and if you go to our website at appalliance.org and you hit the patents section, you'll see an interview with an entrepreneur, a New York-based guy who talks about how he has 5 employees, but now he's got 6 lawyers because he literally quantifies. He says, I haven't hired 2 people, and I stopped taking a salary myself because I'm paying the lawyers. But when we interviewed him, and I don't think this came out in the video interview, when his face is pixelated and his voice has changed because he was petrified that he's going to get sued again. But when we interviewed him privately, and we asked him about, well, how much does this hurt the economy? How much does this hurt your business? He stopped the conversation and he said, you haven't asked me about the most important part. This has completely thrown me sideways emotionally, and I'm in a funk, and how many entrepreneurs are actually just throwing up their hands and walking away? How much energy and excitement around this space are people just literally walking away from? Let me question over there.
Yeah, side note, thank you EFF. I'd like to thank you for protecting my friends, saving people I know from going to jail, so thank you. And on that topic, you brought up a great segue. What country has extradition laws that would allow me to be an innovator? Because I don't have enough money to be able to defend against patent trolls like this as a small person. How can I go somewhere and start a business, and where is that place? Because it's not here.
Gary, you used to work at the International Trade Commission. You want to answer that question?
I don't have have expertise in extradition treaties, so I would have done that one if you don't mind. But the frustration is palpable and it's real. And what we heard a few minutes ago is we really need to raise our voices, and we need to raise them to our Congress, and they move very slow. But we also need to educate the judiciary, because I do a lot of patent litigation, and many of the judges that I come in front of have no idea how destructive these bad patents are. So as the years have progressed, we've had decisions out of the Federal Circuit that actually make it less painful to be a patent troll. For example, there's a recent case that says you can go into the patent office and mislead the patent examiner, hide prior art, and act with almost gross negligence, but that won't affect the enforceability of your patent. All right, so you've got this court really giving another platform for these people to go and get these really lousy patents and almost suffer no consequence. I had a case recently where my client, we had 8 patents asserted against us, and I called them literary patents because they weren't new inventions. They were just the guy who wrote the patent application was very creative at hiding the ball. So what we were able to do was to show the court that the inventor actually based his claimed invention on a piece of prior art that was in his office that he analyzed. And not only did that prior art reveal the invention, it also showed the best way to practice it, which the inventor also didn't tell the patent office. And when we had him in deposition, he said, I wasn't going to tell anybody that. That's the value. That's the real value of the process, and I didn't want to tell people that. So even after all these years of dealing with this inventor who was very, very misleading, we eventually won at the Federal Circuit. It cost $8 million, and yet we still had one judge dissent and say, there's a plague of allegations of this inequitable conduct in front of the patent office, and we have to stop it in cases like this. So we have a judge up there who's thinking, oh, we should let this guy off the hook, even though he misled the patent office, he hid the most important prior art, but that's okay. That's okay, So anyway, my point is that we need to educate not only our congressmen, but the men and women who sit on the bench, so they understand they're really dealing with not the lifeblood of the country and our small entrepreneurs when they allow cases like this to go forward, and they make comments like, well, it's okay to be grossly negligent or just negligent and mislead the patent office, and we shouldn't really elevate the standard to bust these patents unless there's a real fraud, an intentional, absolute, deliberate fraud.
Question, sir.
Yeah, so while we wait for the letter of the law and the system to be fixed, are there movements to try to fix the spirit of the law? Meaning, for example, I applaud the Banjo's decision not to use your patents in an offensive way, but in theory, the company could get sold in the future, which is a likely scenario. And then the new owners could, in turn, then use those patents offensively. Is there a code of conduct or something that can be added that says, this company currently owns this, and we have our patents rightfully, to protect Banjo, but in the case of the company being sold, it's under the stipulation that they cannot be. And are there a code of conduct
The answer is
that can be added?
you certainly can sell your company and say you're not allowed to use this as a weapon, and that's part of the terms, and that'll be reflected in the price that when you sell the company. There are places like the Open Invention Network, where it was built around keeping Linux as an open source community and as an open source software and the opportunity to keep building on it. And what they try to do is buy up patents and also publish to create prior art around Linux-oriented inventions, and Linux includes Android, right? So, and to create a huge database and a publicly accessible database to stop people from patenting things on top of Linux. And that is that they are a well-funded organization that is literally, you could argue that it is completely public-spirited, but of course it's funded by companies who are Linux-oriented companies and don't want other people to grab patents that they'll sue them with. So there's both the public spiritedness. I think if Banjo wanted to, there's the unified patent thing that was just in the New York Times.
Yeah.
There's Google just announced a couple of efforts.
Twitter's got something particularly good. They've got what's called the Innovators Patent Agreement, and they put it up on GitHub. It's a 2-page agreement. It essentially does exactly what you're talking about, where it says every patent Twitter gets from a Twitter employee, Twitter promises it will never use it offensively. And moreover, that promise sticks with the patent for the patent's life. So whoever owns it can't use it offensively unless the inventor, the actual inventor, gives permission.
Is there a way to codify that through the work of something
Yeah,
like
well,
EFF does that goes beyond individuals choosing this, but can, just
So
like
the way
open
the
source
law
thing.
is set now, you'd have to change the law, you'd have to go through Congress.
It's inventor's choice. In Twitter's case, they've made that choice. In Banjo's case, you made the choice. And in some places, you can take your choice and make it binding, right? And arguably binding in perpetuity, unless was Twitter could get bought by somebody who could unwrap it. Maybe they couldn't. I don't know how binding it is.
Well, we can talk about that later, but it's interesting stuff. But you know, I'm actually glad you brought that up, and if I can just jump in for 1 second, that we've talked a lot about this problem, and I mean, I talk about this problem pretty much all day, every day. It's a really fundamentally serious problem, but there's also a lot of interesting, exciting stuff going on in this space, and while Congress doesn't move quickly, and while they kind of punted on the America Invents Act, people are paying attention in Congress more than they ever have before. It's important that you all kind of stay involved because people are listening in DC. The courts, like the federal circuit, it's not ideal, but I think if the federal circuit, you know, they've got a case right now that if they screwed up again, there's a decent chance we're gonna end up in front of the Supreme Court again. So stuff is moving, and you know, Twitter and the Open Innovation Network, and there are a bunch of other ideas out there. And I mean, we're all sitting in a room at night after work talking about patents. Like, something is going to happen, and we have to make sure that what happens is good and is right.